Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us for today's sprint review for Comet Sprint 27 and Shoreline Sprint 29. We are now in the third to the last sprint for the Surfliners fall work cycle, and I'm happy to ask Tansen to take over the reins so that she can tell us what the goals were for the sprint and the team's accomplishments.
Thanks. It's the third sprint and the second to the last. We have one more, right?
Right, you're right.
But we do have our next sprint is planned to be 3 weeks because some of us are going to be out at Samvera Connect next week. So we get a little extra time to get some stuff done. I'm going to show a couple of the things that we've been working on this sprint. The first one is last time we demoed some work that was almost done about collections, adding collections in in bulk file ingests. And I'm going to name this demo. So I'm going to grab a CSV that has both objects and collections within it. And I'm going to create and validate. And what we'll see now is we'll validate that there's an object and that there's a collection. We should be able to see in the object record the relationship to the collection. And if I come back and I import them, actually what I expect to happen here is when I push this button, I get the object imported and then I get the collection imported. And those will happen each. Did I just freeze completely? Can you all hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. This is very disconcerting behavior from Zoom. So the object and the collection each ingest in background jobs. And then once they're both done, then another background job runs at a later time to add the object to the collection. I've pre-run these objects, so I think the relationship will probably, it hasn't come through yet. But we do expect now for on a timeline that's fairly reasonable for this relationship to actually get created. Last time we were failing to create the collection, and that was the problem that we were experiencing. We're going to run a ticket in the new sprint to make this more responsive so that there's not such a delay. But we do now expect if you're ingesting objects and collections and they have complex relationships specified in the they have complex relationships specified in the I think the reason that this didn't come through is that the field is wrong, y'all. I think parents column in this fixture is wrong. I think it should just be parents. But anyway, if this relationship is specified in the CSV and you have as complex of relationships as you desire, they should all eventually resolve after ingest. And again, we're going to do some work in the next sprint to make that a little more responsive so that you can see that the result is correct as soon as the import is done and not have to sort of wait in a in-between state. I think it would make it much easier to identify, for instance, that you've got the wrong column name for the parent relationship. So that's work that we have done. We've also been working on the importers handling of file sets. So, so first of all, I'd like to make us a CSV that has a couple of different works with different file uses. Different file use objects is one that I've just prepped for this. So I'm going to create and validate this. And we'll take a look at the metadata for these objects for a second. Yeah, so let's do these two objects. And we can do the raw metadata. So this first one has a service file, image.jpg, and the second one has both a service file and a preservation file. And what we expect when we've ingested objects structured this way, where I've just included file uses as headers in the CSV, is for all of those file uses to get compiled into one file set. So in the case that I've got an object that's going to have one file set, and that file set's going to have multiple files with different uses inside of it, you can just put those as column headers and put them directly into the CSV. And then if I ingest this, then I should be able to see these objects, each with their file uses. So this is the one with just the service file. Oh, and I've managed to ingest these twice because I use the same IDs from before, but we're just going to inspect one of these file sets that I ingested the other ones just a few minutes ago. So here we have a service file, and over here with my preservation file, and this is an object that I've actually messed around with quite a bit now. I did get both a service file and a preservation file. I can't remember whether we demoed this listing of those files last time, but you can now download the two independently from this page. There's a picture of bees. And additionally, we did some work that's probably merging later today to make it so that these all show up in a drop down here. So this download button is going to be expanded so that you have a download for each of the files in the file set. And you'll be able to see what the use is for that and what the file name for the file is by mousing over. So you see download demo.jpg here. So this will very shortly look like download service file, and then if you mouse over, you'll see this demo.jpg. And likewise for the object that has, or sorry, for likewise, there would be a download preservation file button here with a different file name for the mouse over from the original file name.
Sam,
The
can
other
I
thing,
interrupt real quick?
yeah, please do.
Just because I have it in my brain. If you go back to the file set view, do we really need demo or download in both sections? So yeah, if you go there, see, so those, when you have the file service option to download or the preservation on the left there underneath that thumbnail, we also have download image too. Left.
Oh, here. Yeah.
Yes. Do we need that?
Good question. Do you want to drop it? I think we
so.
can make a ticket to drop that button now that we have a different place for the downloads.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
It doesn't seem like it's helping anybody there. But while we're here, I do also want to point out that I did prep this file to have multiple file set, or this object to have multiple file sets. And one nice feature that we wanted to bring into view is being able to sort of more quickly navigate between file sets in an object. So conveniently, if you have an object with multiple file sets, those file sets have a natural order inside that object, which means that I can easily page between them and see all the various files attached to them with different uses. So this object now has 4 file sets, and I can next and previous to page through them, which we think will make navigation for these quite a bit easier. The other thing that I want to say about file set relationships that we've worked on but haven't yet merged, that I'm hoping that we'll wrap up in the next sprint, is that if we, so what we just looked at was the way of creating a file set or a single file set inside of an object. So if I do a CSV that shows that has a column service file and a column preservation file, and I put those fields in the object, then what I expect is to get one file set with all of those file uses bundled together. In the case that I want to make an object with multiple file sets that may independently have multiple file uses nested inside of them, we are intending to support including rows in the entire rows in the CSV that are the file sets. So in this way, you can add additional file set metadata as appropriate, but also add different sets of file uses to different file sets. So if I say have a file set that has a preservation file and a service file that I'd like to upload, and separately a different file set that has a preservation file and a thumbnail that I've pre-created or something, then I could make a CSV that structures all of that out as individual rows and then uses the parent column to relate those back to objects as desired. And that's something that is progressing on the code side, but that we're not quite ready to show yet. So I wanted to call that out because that's sort of the next step of this complex relationships in these CSVs that's in progress. And in general, we've been interested in making the file set behavior easier to work with through both the UI, which is why you're seeing these UI changes coming through, and in the actual CSV ingest process. Okay. Another thing that we've been working on the CSV side is on the CSV ingest side is validation. So I'm going to show I'm going to demo us a validation. We have a CSV called very bad CSV, and I'm going to create and validate. And we should see that there are no objects, even though no objects actually listed, even though we got 3 rows in the CSV. And the reason for that is given in the error section. The title doesn't have enough titles in it. In the event that the CSV contains multiple errors, we should see them all listed here. I think we didn't prep one that would fail validation in multiple ways for the UCSB schema. But we do expect, if you have different failures for different rows, for different rows of the CSV to report them all out here in a meaningful way that makes it possible for you to see them. So you can see it's row 4 in the CSV that failed. The source identifier field is given, and the nature of the error. And the hope is that reporting errors in this way makes it possible for you to sort of like prep a CSV, put it in for validation, and get enough info back that if your CSV was a little bit half-baked, you could fully bake it in one go rather than trying to like play whack-a-mole with errors and have the system report them to you one at a time. Great. And there's like a lot of stack trace info here that maybe like it might be nice to have a chat upstream about improving this this error report out so that there's more like expansion and squashing of them so that you can see more quickly just what you want to see. Okay. Separately, we did some work on controlled vocabulary management in the object single object create page. And so if we have a field in our configurable metadata setup, M3, that says that it should have a controlled value space, and that controlled value space is given in a list form rather than a reference to an upstream or to an external vocabulary, then you can page through those vocabulary terms and that should work. If I think as sort of as a next step, we have a need to make that kind of vocabulary validation work with Lark upstream. I think that's probably work that we're not looking at completing during the next sprint. But this is sort of the beginning of getting form layer vocabulary management integrated. And much of the code that we've used to achieve this would also be used as part of the process for validating and controlling vocabularies for fields in a configurable way if we were relying on an upstream vocabulary server for them. Last but not least, I want to show some work that we finished upstream some time ago and got merged back in to Comet last sprint, but that we forgot to show you. And that is if I create an object, let's do that. Demo object with embargo. I can create an object with an embargo and set the embargo date to, let's say, December 31, 2025. So this object will be restricted to Surfliner users until the end of 2025, and then it will be open to public. Let's add a file to it. Why not? We're gonna like grab a couple of files. We have a little form bug, so we'll do like that. Okay, save. So we should now see that this object is under embargo. We should see also that the file sets that I've created for it are under embargo. And if I go back to, I think that much had been working already, but importantly, there is a dashboard view for these embargoes. And I can see my object and my two file sets that are currently under embargo, and that in the future, their visibility will change to public. I also have an object here that has an embargo that's expired. So I should be able to see that in this tab. And I can also see a list of things with embargoes that have been released. We're going to give this a try. So if I've got yeah. Let's go back to manage embargoes. Yes, yes, yes. Anyway, I did rather expect to see this object show up in deactivated. Wonder if it just takes a moment to do that. But I do think that we succeeded at releasing the embargo. There's some background code that we want to have in place that's not running for us right now, that should come around and release these embargoes. But mainly this was an example of work that happened upstream that we got the benefit of. So now if you're creating objects with embargoes, you can actually go and see them and do basic management tasks with them. The leases significantly are not working because there's a little more upstream work that has to happen to support the same thing for leases. If just for clarity, leases and embargoes are basically the same thing, just operating in opposite directions. So you have a current visibility and date that the visibility will change, and then a target future visibility. And it's an embargo if the current visibility is more restrictive than the future visibility, and it's a lease if the current visibility is less restrictive than the future visibility. So if you're sorry, did I get that right? Yes, less restrictive. So the lease gives me more permissions in the short term, and the embargo gives me more restrictions in the short term. Okay. So that's that. Amy, would you like to jump in and tell us about the shoreline work that happened? I may stop my share long enough for that.
Yes, Alex, did you want to do this?
I can talk a bit about kind of some of the technical work. I don't know if you want to give kind of a broader overview.
Okay, yeah, I can do that. So I will say, and let me go ahead and share my screen. I think one of the things that we did was as part of geodata, one of the options is to be able to provide alternative downloads and variations of the file that's submitted, and so that's done on the fly. And the things that was happening is that we're not at that and so get those derivatives. And Alex, you can speak more to this, but what happened is that when an object is published in Comet, and I'm going to take one that I've already published. This has been unpublished yet, so I'm going to push it to geodata. Is that when I go ahead and publish, it provides an arc, it mints an arc. At this point, we can see the arc that's listed here. It will go in and it will it'll sort of unzip, I guess, and rename those objects, apply that arc name so that when it's delivered, And this is California water mains 2020. If I go back and take a look, California water mains 2020. I now see that I get this arc is now delivered as part of the file name for any of these derivatives. And so previously those derivatives weren't being provided to the end user.
Yeah.
Alex?
So the problem was that we're using the arc as the ID in Shoreline. But the problem was that when we upload the shapefile to GeoServer, which is where the shapefiles are stored and the derivatives are generated for Shoreline, GeoServer has some interesting limitations where the ID GeoServer assigns internally will always be the file name of the shapefile. For whatever reason, you can't override that. And so we now had when we were testing in development early on, we would just use that as the file name as the Shoreline ID as well, and that was no problem. But then we wanted real IDs and arcs, and so we had a mismatch between the two IDs. And so at first we'd hacked in some code to kind of handle two IDs and map them between each other, so that GeoServer could do whatever it wanted, and we would just accommodate that. But it required kind of some custom codes and overrides, and upstream didn't seem especially interested in working around that. And so we may in the future kind of prod upstream to see if it's possible to make Blacklight or GeoBlacklight more flexible in how it handles GeoServer IDs. But for now, we decided to kind of follow the trend and actually just rename the shapefiles to match our ARC IDs. It would have been easy if we could have renamed them in advance, but prior to ingest. But those arcs that are used as IDs are minted after you upload it into Comet and you do your QA and then publish it. That's when the arc is created. And so we don't know it in advance. And so we had to write a little step in our Shoreline ingest process that actually grabs the zip, unzips it, renames the files as in terms of the arc, and then rezips it and uploads it. So it's a little silly, but it works. And now we have our nice matching shapefile names.
Yeah, so I think that's all we have for this one. We're working on GeoTIFFs, but that will be in the next one, hopefully.
Cool. Thank you, Shoreline team. Gabriella, did you have anything you wanted to say to wrap up?
Not to wrap up yet. I did have a question about the embargoes that you demoed. I was just curious as to whether embargoes can be dealt with using bulk racks.
Oh, good question. I'm certain that they can, at least in principle. What the format for doing that is right now, I'm not entirely sure. Like the question is, I would like to make an object that is under embargo using the bulk CSV process, right?
Yeah, a project.
I would think that there's a documented bulk racks way to do that, and that we should probably test it before we try and demo that, because I think it's possible that will work straight up out of the box, or it's possible we have to make it compatible with Valkyrie.
Okay, great.
But yeah, the short answer is like certainly the bulk racks code base supports that. So I'm not sure what the format is and where we should document it and so on.
Okay, good to know. All right, with that, good work, everybody. Awesome demo. This is great stuff. I'm going to stop recording so that people can feel free to ask questions after I hit this button. So thank you, everyone.